going on, Archons? Welcome to another KeyThoughts episode, fireside chat with this special one, a little fuzzy. So, this week, I think it's going to be a little bit of a shorter episode, but an important one. So, over the last week, you may have heard me touting about these French Worlds Collide displays. They are gone, all sold out. I was able to help promote and move over 90 displays in a week. Very proud of that achievement, and also I appreciate the support of the community taking advantage of this deal and actually helping out my LGS. And so yes, thank you for that. And if you got some French Worlds Collide, hopefully you get some spice. I have, I know Rick has. And yeah, I'm just excited to see what comes and to see these French names appear on TCO more now that we all are in a glut of decks. So to kick things off, of course, we're going to do the card of the week. And we have this week, that's right, Tourbillon Entropique, also known as Entropic Swirl. It is a rare action card from Logos with art by the talented Natalie Russo, my favorite artist in the game. And what this does, it says choose a creature, and for each trait, deal 2 damage to it and gain 1 ember. Wow, wow, wee, wah. This, my friends, is my favorite form of direct damage. I love it in decks with Brend the Fanatic, or in my French deck that this comes from, Brend le Fanatique, and there's 2 Brends in there. The reason why I like this card so much is because you can essentially, most times, deal 4 damage to a creature, gain 2 ember. Period. That is a great trade-off. Even 2 damage, 1 ember is fine, but getting 4 damage on something and gaining 2 ember, that's really nice. And the reason why I like it with Brend is because Brend has 2 traits. So you're dealing 4 damage to Brend, which means you're killing Brend, which means that's a 5 ember gain. If you include in the fact that you're stealing 3 from your opponent, you could technically call that a 8 ember swing, because you're taking 3, gaining 3, or they're losing 3, you're gaining 3, plus another 2 from that Entropic Swirl 2 traits thing. So this is the card of the week. I absolutely love it. I'm never ever disappointed to see that card. I really enjoy it, and I think it's absolutely amazing. Do you have some cool decks with Entropic Swirl? Let me know. Now, the topic for this week I want to talk about is the game and getting more players into the game. I recently had my friend indoctrinated into KeyForge, and she's obsessed with it now, which is great. But how I went about doing it was I didn't just choose random decks in my collection, is I actually thought very carefully about the deck I was going to give. And I mentioned this on my stream. I feel like I may have touched on this last week in this, but I want to dedicate this episode to this exact topic. And what I did was I chose a deck that had Shadow Steel. It had the burst of Untamed, and then it had Logos to do some Logos things. Not the best Logos, but it had Logos so you could see what Logos does. And the key for this, though, is showing the Shadow Steel and then the burst from Untamed. I think those 2 concepts for a person coming into the game and them seeing the Coda version of that, so i.e. you have Hunting Witches in there. That is the most important thing. Hunting Witches and then Direct Steel. Too much to protect, bait and switches, urchins, things like that are what you want. Shadow Selves I think are really cool because it allows them to protect creatures to actually see them in action. So I just found that when I gave her this deck, she really enjoyed it and learned the game very quickly playing this, because the mechanics of the game that are, I think, the most important concepts and the basic concepts are shown very well with those houses. I think if you have Brobnar and to an extent Sanctum in an opening deck that they're just playing with, you're actually giving a concept of fighting into the mix, which is not something I think you should give a new player, because most new players coming into the game are coming from Magic or Pokemon or maybe even Hearthstone, where there is a life-based aspect and you're taking the opponent from X amount of life to 0 to win the game, which is not the case with KeyForge. So by providing cards that strictly say fight and do things that are very natural to them, but are also counterintuitive to how you want to win in KeyForge, I think you might be doing a disservice to a new player. I think giving them the Ember control house and a house that gains Ember. Two things to keep them in the game and things to help them win the game. I think those two concepts are the most important. And she learned the game very quickly, very well, and we're going to move on to new concepts from there. So if you're giving decks away to people to play and you're just giving any old deck that you're not playing anymore, you are doing a disservice to us growing the game. Let me say that again. You are doing a disservice to the growth of the game by indoctrinating people into it. You need to get people to love the game. Part with some decks that are good, that you don't play or you don't need, especially if they're your friends. But don't just be, like for Project Reforge, don't be throwing in random decks. And if you are, make sure there's a variety there so that people can experience something different. I actually think someone coming into the game, grabbing a random deck from a store, opening it up, and then playing KeyForge has a very high chance of them potentially not being hooked into the game. Because of the fact that you get a deck that isn't amazing or doesn't have some of these concepts that really help you understand the game, they could lose sight of what it is. They're not getting the true taste of KeyForge. My plan is to actually create a series to show decks that demonstrate a different thing, have links for them so new players can just go onto TCO and play games with these. And I think this is going to be a really good way of getting people into the game. And if you have a local game store and you want to grow it on a physical level personally as we get out the other side of this pandemic, or maybe people are looking to pick up new games while they're at home with family or a friend or roommate, this will give you an opportunity to give decks and give instructions with it. If you're going to do a Project Reforge, I know we are going to have some things in the form of resources that you can print out, put in with your decks you're giving to the store. Maybe give a little blurb of, hey, play this deck to understand this, like blah, 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 blah. Like give a little pointers of what the decks do. Like start with this deck versus this deck. Find the good matchups if you have the time and will to go that far with your decks. If not, make sure you're giving decks that are going to represent the game. Giving something away for free that does not represent the game doesn't help. You want to hook people into this great game that we play. So keep that in mind when you're going about teaching people the new game, or this new game to them. And that you're representing it. I'm going in my teaching process, I'm actually skipping AOA and going right to Worlds Collide. And then I'm going to circle back to AOA, I think. Because I think Coda to Worlds Collide actually gives the correct representation of what you want to demonstrate for KeyForge. In the sense that you learn the simplicity of the game and they get it, and then you give a Worlds Collide deck, and then you introduce the complexity of the game. And the reason why I like that too is because then you're introducing all the mechanics. So warding, enraging, all that sort of stuff that now suddenly became exalting, that just became new in that point. So then they understand the full scope of what exists within the game when that happens. Not to mention, because Worlds Collide is more complicated, the deck you give can be spent being played more and more, because there's more to it, more that needs to be learnt, more that needs to be mastered. So keep this in mind when you're doing this and you're giving these decks to people. And I truly believe that you go Coda, then into Worlds Collide, circle back to AOA, then jump to Mass Mutations, because AOA is Mass Mutations light in a way in terms of complexity, but it still has the concept of that board presence and whatnot and all the other things. And I think some of the things that may be lacking in AOA are a good lesson to learn, because it is possible to open decks like that in any set. So hopefully this was helpful for you out there trying to expand the game or teach someone the game anew. If you do want to teach someone the game and you would like the link to the deck that I used, let me know. Myself and Carl from Crazy Killing Machine, we're going to be putting together a video series to put out on YouTube and actually have a way to have concepts that exist within decks be represented and a deck to have it. So we are going to play the deck, we're going to demonstrate why this deck does what it does and the concept that's being demonstrated with it. And so these videos can be given to people coming into the game. They can play on TCO. And I have to say, I think learning how to play the game on TCO might actually be the best course of action rather than teaching IRL, in-person physical, because having to play around with the tokens when you're just learning the game is one more thing you're thinking about instead of thinking about what cards you should be playing when and why. And that way you can avoid that aspect of the game. And then when they go to IRL, they'll just be playing around with the tokens and they'll be familiar. They'll just know they have to do things themselves because it's not automated. So I think that's a really good way of teaching the game. And I'm a huge fan of this process right now. Like I feel pretty confident that you can teach someone the game very well and also have them understand and get hooked into it very easily because they're getting to understand the fun things about the game. And then you can start figuring out what houses they like. They may not like shadows, for example. They may not like that concept. They may not like logos. They may not like Untamed for any given number of reasons. But it's going to show them the game, and then they can discover the houses they really like after that. The point is, the first taste has to be delicious. They got to want to come back for more. So, I hope this helps. Reach out if you have any questions, any thoughts on my thought process with this. If you've had other experiences, please let me know. Do comment below. And that's going to do it for this week. So, folks, thank you as always, and may your ember never be stolen and your keys forged promptly. Have a good one.